Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everyone here. Good morning, everyone who's watching from around the world. I know there's one doctor that I work with from Madrid, Dr. Goriz. Hello out there. If you're watching, welcome. And welcome everyone here. Thank you for going in from this beautiful day to stay indoors for a few hours. Hopefully you'll find it worthwhile. I can't show audio. Wait, let's see. How do I do the pointer? Sorry. Is it this button?
Side.
That advances.
Yes.
How do I? Is the laser pointer here?
Laser pointer's in the center.
Oh, this one. Got it. Okay. So this was going to be that Alanis Morissette song, "Jagged Little Pill," right? It's a dysphagia song, but we'd get into licensing issues, and that would gum up the works. So I can talk about it. I certainly will not sing. So we're going to talk about how did we get to the acid reflux epidemic. Why am I calling it an epidemic? 60 million people have reflux disease. That's a lot of people, right? So it's about 30% of the population. 1% of the population has celiac disease. 20% of all new food products are gluten-free. Do you know any product out there for acid reflux for 30% of the population? Let me know. So what is acid reflux? So the traditional thinking, oh, I did it again, sorry. The traditional thinking about acid reflux is regurgitation of gastric contents, which are acidic, up towards the esophagus, laryngeal area. The lungs can be affected, the nose, sinuses, other areas of the head and neck can be affected as well. However, if you remember the old Alka-Seltzer commercial, right? Plop, plop, fizz, fizz was the line. It was very popular. It sort of put a very funny angle on reflux disease, right? Plop, plop, fizz, fizz. You smile, right? You don't think of a skull and crossbones when you see this dude here sitting on the edge of the bed complaining. And he was the face of acid reflux disease for many, many years, which was very funny until it became not funny at all. So this is the old thinking. An older, middle-aged, heavy central obesity male. Well, okay, young person. Now, any gender, any age, throat burn too. It's not just things coming up. The take-home message today, and you'll be able to help your patients Monday morning if you're going to be in the office. Things that you eat are going to cause a tremendous amount of irritation. And no amount of medication in the world is going to stop something acidic from doing its damage, right? Because the horse is out of the barn already. So that's very important. When you look at this face, last year I diagnosed Barrett esophagus, which is a potentially precancerous lesion in 10 men and women under the age of 30. All right? That 10 years ago it would have been reportable. Now there's a lot in the literature that supports that. We're seeing Barrett esophagus in younger and younger individuals, and likely you've seen it in your practices. Has anyone here ever taken care of someone with Barrett esophagus? Okay. All right. Has anyone ever seen or taken care of someone with Barrett under the age of 30? Have you seen that yet? No. Okay. The night is young. Okay, so to the point, 60 million people have reflux disease. How did we get here? And you know I put the Talking Head song here. Okay. So how did we get here? Well, in the 50s and 60s, we were eating at home primarily. And then slowly, things began to change. In the 70s, I say, look what we're bringing home. And then in the 70s, the government is helping us out. How did they help us out? It started with something called Title 21, which is a long series of laws, the essence of which is that you need to acidify food as a preservative to prevent botulism, which is food poisoning, right? So it's a very noble idea. I won't even tell you what music I put here. Okay, so all food in cans or bottle needs to be acidified. So I'll give one example that will make your hair stand straight up. Baby banana food is 100 times more acidic than a banana. All right, pH 6, pH 4. The number is just 2, but it's a logarithmic scale. People in the food industry, if they're not aware of this, don't want to hear it. In fact, there's all these studies saying it's so important to add vitamin C to baby food. Okay, but did you test the pH of that stuff? The answer is maybe, but they're certainly not going to tell us. So what else happened? Well, the acid reflux epidemic was just getting started. That number, 60 million. It's a lot of people. So what else happened? So these are wholesale changes in how we create our food, how we make our food. We don't really think of that. We're certainly not taught that in medical school. We're certainly not taught that in graduate school. Maybe you are, and I'd like to know about it because I think it's something that is probably going to be taught. What you're learning today, you will teach your interns and the other people that work with you. So we'll look at sugar, for instance. And I'll pick, again, one example. There are multiple examples. I'm picking something that you could remember. You can remember Title 21. You're going to remember high fructose corn syrup. I mean, you just have to go to any grocery store, pick up any ketchup, any barbecue sauce. The first or second ingredient is high fructose corn syrup. Okay, so what's the big deal? This is the big deal. High fructose corn syrup is acidic in and of itself. One of the ingredients in the processing is sulfuric acid. Obviously, it's not a huge portion of it, but it's part of it. And the chemicals used in the processing loosen the lower esophageal sphincter. So a lot of the foods that we think are acidic, for instance, everyone says, hey, get this low-acid coffee. But coffee has a pH close to 6, so it's not very acidic. But coffee and chocolate share the following physiologic properties. It loosens the lower esophageal sphincter and it increases hydrochloric acid production by the stomach. So the idea of having a low-acid coffee makes no sense to me. Are they suddenly getting rid of the physiologic properties of methylxanthine? The answer is no. So in 1975, sugary soda surpassed coffee as the most common beverage Americans drink, and we never looked back. So sugary soda is the most acidic substance we consume. Now, I have patients that come in and they say, they're hoarse. Doc, I only have 3 sodas a month. And so my answer is I only pour battery acid down my throat 3 times a month. And they look at me. I look at them. They're hoarse. I'm not. So I'm not saying it's the only reason, but I'm not a fan. It's extremely acidic. Coca-Cola's 2.5 pH. Diet Coke 3.1, 3.2, depending on the accuracy of your equipment. And the song I was using here was the Charlie XCX song, Boom Clap. Okay, now, if you've ever seen American Idol, what do the judges have on their tabletop? A bowl of carrots? Not that I've seen, right? So something that's not very good for the throat, for the vocal cords, is sponsoring the good voice shows. You've all seen it. We said, what's the big deal? Let's hear the next contestant. Okay, it's like having the tobacco company sponsoring the Olympics. And I don't think that happens. I'm sure they've tried. Okay, so what's the dark side of all this? The dark side of all this is untreated acid reflux leads to esophageal adenocarcinoma, which you starting in the 70s, you're going to 2000, you see the arc here. It's by far the fastest growing cancer in America and Europe. Most people do not know that. And I love when you hear, oh, well, it's leveling off. It's a very deadly disease, and I think it's one of the few diseases that actually can be prevented, and by activity of everyone in this room. You can actually make an impact pronto. So, again, more of the dark side. If we don't do anything about this, esophageal cancer within 10 years can exceed colon cancer as the second most common cancer killer in the United States. So that's quite a statement. We don't like to think about it, but we're putting together the argument. And it's about symptom recognition. I'm going to say this a bunch of times today because there's only a handful of take-home messages. We'll summarize it in the end as Dr. Blicker suggests. But it's not only heartburn, it's throat burn. And why? I'm asked this 5 times a day. Doc, I don't have heartburn. How could I possibly have reflux disease? And the answer is acid causes a burn, and when tissues are burned, they swell. When tissues swell, they're numb. We've published this extensively. Nick Chaklis and Dr. Blicker are aware of this. We did this work years ago at Columbia. I'm going to show you some of the data a little later. But when tissues are swollen, they're numb. That's one side. And then most recently, just about a month ago, in Journal of American Medical Association, it showed that the injury from acid reflux disease, thought to be a lumen event, right? A little area is injured, and that's why you feel discomfort. As it turns out, you release a cytokine-mediated inflammatory response that goes way beyond the area of injury. So people who are eating inflammatory foods, this is the inflammatory theory of disease, not a theory anymore. When you have inflammation way beyond your body point where you think you have the injury, you're going to have inflammation in many, many other areas, which, and I'll relate the story as we talk about diet, the anti-inflammatory diets are going to do a lot more than treat your reflux disease. That's what you're going to find as you start suggesting to the doctors that you work with, the patients that you work with, the nutritionists that you work with, that these low-acid diets are seeming to have other benefits. So what are the consequences of a misdiagnosis or a diagnosis that sort of percolates along? You're taking unnecessary medications and underlying disease progresses. How many patients do you see saying, oh, my antihistamines are not working, my nasal steroid sprays are not working, I'm still, right? I call it the chuching symptoms. I can say it, but I can't spell it. So what are the known risk factors? And again, we're going to go through this a bunch of times because it's so important. Acid reflux disease, whether it's heartburn reflux or what I call throat burn reflux, you'll notice I don't like the term silent reflux, okay? Silent means no heartburn. But there's nothing silent about people coughing, clearing their throat, grunting, all the things that you hear and you take care of in your practices. It's not silent. You hear it, right? The show's about to start. Everyone's, Those are all refluxers. And then we're going to talk about Barrett. We're going to talk about a little bit about obesity. It ties into the dietary approaches here. And as we're trying to realize why we're here today, you take care of these symptoms almost exclusively, right? So these throat burn reflux symptoms, which is under your watch, are alarm symptoms for the development of esophageal adenocarcinoma. Dysphagia, hoarseness, chronic cough, throat clearing, lump sensation, sore throat, postnasal drip. You see these all the time. You're sending the patients off to the allergist, which is fine, but in the back of your mind, when they come back to you, did you see your ENT? Did you see your gastroenterologist? Have the discussion. It's okay to have the discussion. You can only help your patients this way. So the mechanisms, again, it's not only what comes up, it's what goes down. And the why is pepsin. So pepsin is an enzyme that sits in the stomach. It gets activated in acidic environments. It's otherwise quiet. But it was shown many years ago by Nikki Johnston, who's a researcher originally in the UK and now is in Madison, Wisconsin, that pepsin can float. It can sit in the vocal cords. It could sit in the middle ear spaces. It could sit in the sinuses, sit anywhere in the head and neck. It sit in the lungs. So when you eat or drink something acidic, you basically awake the sleeper enzyme. Pepsin suddenly gets active, and what you eat can start eating you. Pepsin. Now, I've heard some folks say they don't believe in pepsin. Well, some people say the world is flat. We'll continue. Any questions?